Okay, welcome back. This is the third of 3 videos on changing fractions to decimals to percents, and you'll notice that I'm always doing these problems in that order, in the fact that I go from a fraction to a decimal to a percent, or from a percent to a decimal, and a decimal to a fraction. You may need to watch the first 2 videos to pick up all the information, but I didn't want to make any of these videos so long that it made the watching of them cumbersome, and then if you figured it out quickly you wouldn't have to watch all 3. But I also wanted to complete this chart of common percents that I feel like everybody should be able to know and be able to convert. The next one I have is 7/10, and so we're going to convert it. And on this case, on all the other ones, I have done this by hand, but I'm going to go back and show you on the calculator to help show you how to do this on the calculator, converting a fraction into a decimal. And I wanted to be sure that I'm showing you how to do that on the calculator as well. So what we do is, to convert it on a calculator, we're going to type in 7, then the divide sign, remembering that our fraction is the same, represents a division problem, 7 divided by 10, and then the 10, and then we press the enter, and that will give us the decimal answer. Now you may say, well, why don't I just do that? Well, you need to ask your teacher what level of calculator use is acceptable for your teacher, because that does vary teacher to teacher. Next, we want to change this into a percent, and remember, when we change this into a percent, we need to move our decimal over 2 places. And when we're going from, and I'm going to write this again because I folded the paper down, but when we're changing, I always try to keep in mind that we're going from a fraction to a decimal to a percent. So if I'm going from a decimal to a percent, the arrow is pointing to the right, left to right. So I move the decimal from the left 2 places to the right, and that gives me 70%. Okay, on the next one, I've given the decimal, and with that glare, that decimal is not showing up, but there is a decimal there. So I've got decimal 75, and I'm going to move it again 2 places to the right and get 75%, or taking 0.75, changing it into a fraction, I'm going to write it over 100. I write it over 100 because it's the 7 places in the tenths and the 5 is in the hundredths. Remembering your place values, tenths, hundredths. 2 places gives me 2 zeros, then write the 7 and the 5, then reduce that fraction. 25 goes into both. 25 goes into 75 3 times. 25 goes into 100 4 times. And you say, well, how can she do that so fast? Well, remember, we're talking about quarters. How many quarters, 25 cents, are there in a dollar? It's 4. And how many are in 75 cents is 3. Okay, and then our next problem is 80%, and so I'm going to write 80 and then take that decimal, and since we're moving from a percent to a decimal, my arrow is going to be, going in this direction, and so I move the decimal back 2 places, so that's going to be 0.80, and that's going to give me 0.80, which is 80 over 100, which reduces down to 8 over 10, dividing both by 10, which then reduces down to 4 over 5, dividing both by 2. Notice in this case, I could go straight from the percent, take the percent and write, because it's per cent, which is per 100, and write it over 100. That just gives me this answer, which then reduces, excuse the tongue-tied there, which then reduces to the same fraction. So sometimes it is easier to go from the percent to the fraction and the fraction to the percent, but most of the time I find it easier to just go through the decimal, because changing a percent to a decimal and a decimal to a percent is rather easy, and from a fraction to a percent and a fraction to a decimal and a decimal to a fraction has a nice process as well. So instead of worrying about a lot of processes, I just keep it in this order. Now, in the next one, we're going to go and convert, and I'm going to move the decimal 0.8333, and I can write as many threes as I want, but I need to leave myself room to repeat enough and move 2 places, again because I'm going from the decimal to the percent. I move over 2 places to the right, and that's going to be 83.33%. And I want to show you a trick with your calculator. We could then look and see, well, that repeating 3 kind of leads us to some other ideas here. But I want to just show you a trick on the calculator. And it works on the TI-84s and the pluses. And I'm just showing it to you because I think it's kind of neat that your calculator will do this. And I'm just going to type in the repeating 3s. And notice that I'm just going to sit here and talk and just keep hitting 3s and 3s. And I'm not counting the 3s. I don't want you to count the 3s. I just want you to hit a whole bunch of 3s. And it doesn't really matter how many as long as you hit a lot. And you'll say, well, how many is a lot? Well, test it out and see. And once you hit a lot of 3s, I then want you to hit math and then convert to a fraction and then press enter, and that gives me 5/6. Now, there are other ways that we actually convert 0.8333 into the decimal 5/6. It's a long, drawn-out process, and it's not difficult, but it is long and can be tedious. I do not think that our teachers here at Walter State will ask you to convert 0.83 repeating 3s into a fraction. If they do, I will tell you that your best bet is to stop by and let me show it to you in person as opposed to trying to show it to you on a video podcast. So, and I showed you the trick on the calculator, but if we do it in reverse, you can see how it works out. And so this is the way I'm going to show you to do this particular one, because sometimes we use the tools that were provided. The next one, we have 7/8, and we're going back to that division. 8 divided into 7. 8 goes into 78 times, which gives me 64. With 6 left over, 8 goes into 67 times, which gives me 56. With 4 left over, 8 goes into 45 times. So that's 0.875. Move the decimal over 2 places and we get 87.5%. The next one, we started with 0.9. So we're going to have 0.9. We need to move it 2 places, so we need to add a 0 and we'll get 90%. And if we start with 0.9, that's going to be 9/10, which doesn't reduce. Now, the next one, and I know you can't see that just does not show up at all. Well, I'm going to make it dark and big, and it becomes a 1. How do we write 1 as a decimal? 1. No tricks there. Is 1 a fraction? Yes. Is 1 a decimal? Yes. How do we write it as a percent, though? We take 1 and we want to move the decimal 2 places. So we move it over 2 places and it becomes 100%. And that finishes up our chart. And what we've created is a chart from 1/10 up to 1 of some of the common percents that are most often used. And what I wanted to say is that this is one that these are the common ones, and some of these we really ought to just know. Others we ought to be able to figure out rather quickly. And I hope by watching some of these that you've learned some of the techniques of changing these. We didn't go into some of the unusual ones, the ones that are greater than ones, the ones that are smaller than a whole percent. And so there are some other cases to look at. And if you need some additional help, be sure you stop by the Math and Behavioral Social Science building on the main campus of Walter State and get some additional help. We'll be glad to help you through this or any of your other math questions that for our Walter State students. And I hope these helped.